Hi, thank you. It's Tracy Johnson here. I am a Vista Outreach Marketing and Recruitment Specialist, and I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar for Vistas on writing powerful impact statements. Assisting me today will be Robin and Suzanne, and we're all here to help you during today's session and to make sure that your questions get answered. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenters, two of my colleagues from the state offices, Mary and James.
Thank you, Tracy, for that introduction. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on impact stories. Today, James and I will be talking about how to write and share an impactful story about the work that you're doing. But before we start with the agenda, we'd like to take a minute to introduce ourselves and talk a little bit about our background in national service. My name is Mary Raleigh, and I work with the corporation in the Texas State Office in Austin. And here at the state office, I work with Vista and senior core projects across the state. I've been working with the state office for a little over a year now, so I'm still fairly new to the corporation. As far as my national service background, I was a Peace Corps volunteer from 2004 to 2006 in the Dominican Republic. And as a Peace Corps volunteer, I did capacity building work with women's groups along the Dominican-Haitian border. And here in Austin in 2010, I also served part-time as an AmeriCorps member while I was in graduate school. And as an AmeriCorps member, I worked with Goodwill Industries of Central Texas doing direct service work. And specifically, I did financial literacy counseling with community members here in Austin, Texas. So with that said, James, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. My name is James Griffin, State Program Specialist here in Phoenix, Arizona. And similar to Mary, run the Senior Core Program and the Vista program around the state of Arizona. I got started with my national service straight out of college, straight out of undergrad. I did a AmeriCorps program called AmeriCorps NCCC. Some of you may have heard of it. Traveling around the country doing different projects. So I was had projects in California, in Alabama, in Louisiana, and then lastly in Arizona, focusing mainly on disaster relief and environmental projects, which is what NCCC teams tend to do. After that, I did another year of national service with Student Conservation Corps in Florida on a wildland fire crew. And then, yeah, I've worked with a small nonprofit in Boston before joining the corporation just about a year now, last January, or I guess this January. So, yeah, so a little bit about me. But yeah, moving on into what we're going to talk about today with the agenda. We're going to first just start off, what is an impact story? Some of you probably don't know what we're talking about, so get everyone on the same page around that. And then what questions are answered in these stories, and why are these impact stories so important to us, and why we ask you to write them. And when you're writing them, who is the audience that you should be focusing for these stories, and how we as the corporation use these stories, and how you can use them as well. And then we'll finish up with the different types of impact stories. There's 3 different categories. And then we'll finish up with a couple examples of our own, and then as well as getting some of your Vista colleagues involved with their examples. So first off, just to get everyone on the same page, just wanted to give a short summary of what an impact story is. It's simply just a story that shows how your work has made an impact in your community through the different projects you're involved in. It's a very, very brief statement. It's not a 2-page essay that you may have written in college or something. It's a very brief, nothing more than a paragraph, nothing more than 4 or 5 sentences long, that summarizes a project you may be involved in, or an event that you're involved in as a Vista. So with that said, we just felt it would be helpful to maybe break down the word impact and give meaning for each of the letters. So I is for informs. Your story should provide information to those in your organization, those in your community and state, as well as a number of other people about what your specific project is doing to have an impact in the community. M is for measures. Your story should illustrate the results your project is having by talking about the measures of impact the project has on the community. The P is for personalizes. Your story should connect the audience with the outcome. Make them want to care or relate to the people you are affecting with impact by personalizing the story for the readers of the story. A is for activates. Your story tells an impactful story that leads the reader to take some sort of action, whether it's for them to join national service themselves or to volunteer in their community, to share the impact story with people in their network, or to raise funds and donate to maybe your specific organization. Whatever it be, a great impact story will activate people to take action. C is to cultivate. Your story can open the door to new partnerships with other organizations or elected officials, for example, and this can lead to more sustainability for your project. Once you're gone, this cultivation leads to the project continuing. And lastly, the T is for teaches. Your story should teach others about the great work you're doing in your community, and it allows us as the corporation to tell your story and pass it on to other elected officials. So that's a little bit of a brief summary. I'll pass it on to Mary to go over the key questions that your impact story should answer.
Yeah, thanks, James. So now that we've learned about the basics of an impact story and we've answered the question of what do we mean when we say impact story, let's talk a little bit now about the specifics, about what exactly you're going to include in your story. And the reality is that when you think about all the work that you're doing and its impacts, that you probably could write pages and you really may not even cover everything that you're doing. So it really can be a challenge to break down what you're doing and narrow it down so that you can concretely communicate your work and its results in only 4 to 5 sentences. It's like an elevator speech for your Vista work, but in writing. And as an aside, I should also add that no two impact stories are alike. While we're presenting here a pretty formulaic structure for writing impact stories by their very nature are really individual. So along the way, you may find that you may not be able to answer all of these questions, and you may not be able to address a specific point, and that's okay. What we're trying to convey here are some first steps for thinking about what information your impact story may have. So in general, impact stories answer these questions. 1, where does the story take place? Set the stage. 2, what issue is it that you're working on? What's the need statement for your story? 3, who is involved in your story? Who are your partners? And 4, how did you do it? And 5, of course, what were the results? So next we're going to go through these questions one by one and break them down a little bit. Okay, so the first one is where? Where does your story take place? And this is the opportunity to set the stage. Tell us about the setting that you're working in. Some things that you can include or that you should include, your name, the name of the Vista member working on the project. If it's more than 3 members working on a single project, it may be best to just say the Vista members at Habitat for Humanity, or for example, the Vista members at Meals on Wheels, rather than writing out the names of all 10 Vista members that worked on that project. But if we're talking about 1 or 2 members working on a project, then you can list out the names of the specific individuals. You should also include, of course, the name of the organization that you're working at. And also, we want to know the name of the city and the state where you're working. And if it's a rural area, you should provide some description in addition to the name of the city and the state so that people can know what we're talking about. For example, here in Texas, if you're working in Lufkin, Texas, many people may not know where Lufkin is. So it would be good to add some description around that. For example, the Vista members working at Habitat for Humanity in Lufkin, Texas, a small city in East Texas. And then you can go on to tell your story. But that way the readers really will know where it is that the story takes place. And also include, if it's applicable, the name of the event where the impact happened. Let's look at the next question. What is the issue area? This is where we need to discuss the community need or needs being addressed. What is the need statement for your impact? Why is it that you're doing the work that you're doing? And because we're talking about Vista here, the ultimate goal is to alleviate poverty. So at the core of it, it becomes in what area you're working to combat poverty. And here at the corporation, we have 6 focus areas that we work in. And these focus areas are disaster services, economic opportunity, education, environmental stewardship, healthy futures, and finally veterans and military families. And these focus areas are the areas in which Vistas work. So in general, your needs statement will align probably with one of these focus areas. Are you building, for example, capacity for an organization that's working with homeless veterans? Or maybe you're working in an organization that works with at-risk children in a school. Or maybe providing financial literacy counseling to adults. And so these are the community needs that are being addressed by your work. This is what is answering the what is the issue area question. So let's look at our next question, the who question. Who is involved? Who are you working with? Who are your partners? Some potential partners that we've thought of along the way, partnerships with other national service programs, AmeriCorps state and national members, NCCC members, or senior corps programs that may be working in your area and may have worked with you on this story. Or maybe you're working with other public or nonprofit agencies. And of course, what about funders? If we're talking about fundraising, who is the public or philanthropic agency that's granting you the funds? And this is important information to note in your impact story. Also, let us know if there's any high-profile people that were involved, city or state officials that attended the event. Did your work get noticed by high-profile people? Let us know about that. And also tell us who was affected by the impact. Who are your clients? Tell us a little bit about who is impacted by the work that you're doing. Are we talking, for example, about veterans, older adults, kids, the environment, etc.? And finally, was there prominent news service that covered the event? These are all things that contribute to your impact. Okay, finally, how are you addressing the problem? And this is where we get to the point about the work that you're actually doing. And this is your chance to brag. Don't be modest. A lot of times we want to hide behind our accomplishments, but this is really the chance for you to tell us what it is that you're doing that is creating all these great impacts. So what are the kind of things that you might be doing? Well, since this is Vista, we'll be talking about capacity building work. And so what type of capacity building work resulted in the impact? Some common capacity building activities that we came up with, fundraising, in-kind, or monetary donations. They both count towards that, of course. Grant writing, recruiting or training volunteers, designing new programs. And these are just some of the ways in which Vistas across the country engage in capacity building work that really results in those impacts that we're talking about. Okay, so our final question, what are the results of your effort? This is what is the impact of your capacity building work? And this is the chance to show off your success. Numbers, numbers, numbers. Please use all of the data that you may be collecting. Use your current reporting and data collection systems. Look to monthly and quarterly reports that you may be submitting to us here at the corporation or to other funders for information on clients served, new programs generated, that type of stuff. And so what kind of numbers are we thinking about? For example, amount of money raised. Again, include those in-kind donations too. But along with the money, think about the impact. What is the ultimate result? So let's say, okay, you raised $1,000. And what is the impact of this money raised? What will the money be used for? Will there be, for example, additional number of meals served? Or, for example, additional number of individuals receiving case management services? Keep thinking through these things about the ultimate results and the ultimate impact of your work. Or, for example, tell us the number of volunteers recruited. And again, think about the results of these volunteers recruited. What will these volunteers be doing? Will there be an additional number of children mentored by these volunteers? These are all the ultimate impacts of the great work that you guys are doing around the country. So in addition to the numbers, also consider using quotes from clients served or volunteers in your impact stories. As long as they're short quotes, sometimes these quotes can be really powerful and give a really good personal voice to your impact. So while your work may seem simple on the surface, it's when we really dig down into the impacts that you can clearly and concisely, of course, state what the impact of your work is. You didn't just write a grant. You wrote a grant that brought $1,000 to an organization which allowed them to serve 50 more children. Your work brings results, and it's really being able to talk about these results that's important. So I'm going to turn it over to James here to talk a little bit about writing these impact stories.
All right, so now that you know a little bit more about impact stories and specifically the questions that need to be answered in the stories, we thought it'd be helpful to go over a couple quick tips about writing an effective impact story. First off, it's very, very important to start with the idea. that whoever is reading the story knows absolutely nothing about your project, your agency, or your community, and it is your job to inform them of the great work that your project is doing in the community. Next, it's also very important to set the stage, as Mary said, by providing a quick overview of the issue area that you're addressing with your project, as well as the community that's impacting, or that you're having the impact in. Also, make the story interesting by using active action words and descriptive words to make the reader want to continue to read and pass the story on to others. It's also extremely important to talk about the different, as Mary said, the numbers. The numbers of volunteers you recruited, the hundreds or thousands of dollars that your fundraiser raised. Use those numbers to brag about the results that you're having in your community. Next up, it's also really important not to use acronyms. Every agency, the corporation included, we use acronyms all the time. We have our own little jargon, our own language, but it's very important to avoid using them because going back to tip number 1, assuming that whoever's reading this knows nothing about your project, and these acronyms could just confuse them. So avoid using them, or at least spell them out the first time and then use them after that. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, it's a short summary of your project, so get straight to the point. Don't waste words on non-important information. Quickly set the stage and get to the facts. Get to the true impact, the true numbers that you had in your community. Okay, so I'm going to transfer back to Mary just to go over some examples.
Yeah, thanks, James. So now that we've talked a little bit about the questions that we have going into impact stories and a little bit about writing them, we thought we would step back for a little bit and talk about an actual real-life example of an impact story. And so I am going to read this impact story, but as I read it, I would like for you to think about what is missing in this example. And when we think about what's missing, keep in mind those key questions. Where does the story take place? What is the issue area? Who is involved? How are you addressing the problem? And what are the results? So I'm going to read it, and I want you to think about what is missing. And if you can take the time to use the chat feature, which folks are so lovely in using already, and write down a brief statement about what is missing here. What do you think you want to know more about? What should the writer have included when they wrote this impact story? I'm going to read it now. So Vista members at School on Wheels worked with staff to present the education celebration at the Indianapolis Marion County Central Library. The event grossed over $200,000 to support School on Wheels' mission of impacting homeless children. So $200,000, that's a lot. This is great. So what are we thinking about what's missing? Let's look over in the chat. The how and the results. Yeah, what is it that they're presenting about an education seminar? What is this? What is the results? They raised $200,000, but what are they going to do with it? What exactly did the Vistas do? This is great. How many children were impacted? And what is the definition of the celebration? Another comment here, what was the money used for? I think that that's a big point here, and that's what I see mainly is what is this money used for? It says that they're impacting homeless children, but impacting can mean a lot of things. So I would be really curious to learn what it is that they're talking about. Let's see what else. What was the event? What exactly was the mission? Where? All great things. Number of people served, percentage, all those kind of things. So there's definitely some things that are missing in this story. So let's go on to the next slide. And James and I actually pulled this out of a recent report, and this was actually the full impact story that was submitted. And you'll see that as we read it, not all of the questions are answered. And that may be an okay thing, it may not. We may have some questions that were not answered. But we also have to think that we're only writing an impact story in at most 4 to 5 sentences. So we may not really be able to answer all of these questions. But let's look at what the story is. So I'm going to read it. Vista members at School on Wheels worked with staff to present the education celebration to over 500 guests and 40 sponsors on Friday, April 26th at the Indianapolis-Marion County Central Library. Peyton Manning and Mitch Daniels were special guests at the event, which grossed over $200,000 to support School on Wheels' mission. School on Wheels provides one-on-one tutoring and educational advocacy for school-aged children impacted by homelessness. So we can see here that there's a lot of really great information that's included in this second draft of the story that we read earlier. The one thing is the 500 guests and the 40 sponsors gives us a little bit more information about what is this education celebration that we're talking about. We still don't really know exactly what the Vista members do. It just says they worked with staff. It may have been good to provide some more descriptive words, but we do have a little better of a sense of the scope and the size of this education celebration. Those numbers are really powerful. You know, if it's an education celebration with 50 members, it's a very different celebration. Not that it's not a wonderful celebration, but it's a different celebration than when we think of such a large-scale celebration with 500 guests. We also have Peyton Manning and Mitch Daniels attending, which is exciting, and which kind of gives us a peek into the importance of those, you know, VIP name-dropping things that we were talking about earlier. If there's state or local officials that were involved, those can really add a big impact to the statement. And then finally, that last sentence, School on Wheels provides one-on-one tutoring and educational advocacy for school-aged children impacted by homelessness. That's the great sentence there. That's the result sentence that I think really was lacking in that first guess, that first pass of the example. So that last sentence, what is it that they're doing with this money? Well, they're providing one-on-one tutoring and educational advocacy for school-aged children impacted by homelessness. So this tells us a little bit more about the story and what exactly was taking place and what the impacts would be. So we thought we would just show this, and this is actually a real-life example. This did happen, and so we thought we would just share it with you so that you get a sense of really what it is that an impact story may look like. Okay, so thank you everybody for your comments and your participation on this. It's great to hear your thoughts on these impact stories. And like I said, you know, a lot of times the story may not answer every single question, and it may not even be possible to answer every single question with 4 or 5 sentences. But what we really want to do is provide those as a framework so that you can think about your impact and think about what you want to pull out for your impact story. So I'm going to turn it over to James.
All right, thanks, Mary. So you might be wondering why we're making such a big deal, why we have this whole webinar around impact stories, and why, for myself personally, just about every time I'm talking with one of our Vista projects here in Arizona, I'm emphasizing the importance of these impact stories. They're greatly important. One, as we've already mentioned, they help tell the project story, help tell the impact that you're having in the community, as well as a number of different other things. For instance, building new support for the Vista program, or building new support for your specific local organization by informing the community about the work that you're doing. An impactful story can also lead to new partnerships. So for example, let's say you write a story and post it to your organization's Facebook page. Someone at another organization reads it and reaches out to you or your organization to partner and create more sustainable projects for the future. It also helps, stories also help engage community leaders. So for example, the stories inform mayors and other community leaders about the impact your specific project is having on the community, and this is greatly important to keep the community leaders updated on your projects in the community. The stories can also help recruit new members or new volunteers. Going back to the example of posting it on your Facebook page, let's say a member of the community reads your impact story on your organization's Facebook page and says, wow, that sounds like a really great project to be a part of. I want to be a part of that, and they end up volunteering and signing up to be a volunteer. And this, again, just creates more sustainable impact in the community. And then lastly, it just helps keep us at the Corporation for Community Service, national and community service, sorry, to tell your story about the great work that you're having. So all these reasons and many, many more is why these stories are so important. So with that said, you might be wondering who's reading these, who's the audience when you're writing these, and I wanted to point out I put that picture of President Barack Obama on this slide specifically because, as the last bullet point on this slide points out, members of Congress and other elected officials, each state office pass these stories up to headquarters each month in D.C. And these stories are read by elected officials just to stay informed about what's happening in their different states and what's happening nationally with national service. And that can lead to a number of different things, including continued funding of the national service program. So obviously that's really important. So just keep those elected officials in mind when you're writing. But with that said, there's a number of different other audiences that can read these. For instance, you're members of your community that want to stay updated with what's going on in the community. Also members of your agency, specifically maybe like upper management, which they don't know exactly the great details about what each project is doing, but a quick summary of what each project is doing can keep them updated with the overall impact. Also, the stories keep your volunteers updated and connected with the overall mission of their volunteer service. Another audience would be maybe your clients of your organization, just to keep them updated again with the overall projects that the agency is involved in. And then your organization can also use these stories, to help create new funds, whether it's using them in different grants that you might try to get new funds for your organization. And then lastly, your state office. For me personally, and I know other state program specialists, we don't have that much one-on-one contact or one-on-one interaction with you guys, with the Vistas, and we rely on these stories to stay informed on the impact that you guys are having in your community. So very important to us as well as state office. All right. So you have written this great impact story that answers all of the questions that Mary talked about: the what, the where, the who, the how, and provides the results. But now what do you do with it? How do you share it with others? And if you guys want to, in the chat feature, discuss some different ways that you might, if you've written them, how you guys might share it around your community. But just for the interest of time, we'll move on. And yeah, so the main thing, as you can see from this slide, is just to share with as many different people as possible. And this is just a brief list of people that we could think of. So for instance, your agency leaders, your board of directors, your different colleagues, and I know the two Vistas that we'll be presenting later, we'll talk about this some more on who they've shared their stories with. But yeah, like I said, just the main thing is just share it with as many people as possible. Post it to your organization's Facebook page, or post it to the AmeriCorps Vista Facebook page, which you'll see the link on the slide there. Tweet it if you tweet. Here are a couple people that you could tweet it to. So again, just want to emphasize, share it with as many people as possible. That's the key thing, because the key thing is just to get the word out. All right, so moving on. We, as the state office, break these stories into basically 3 categories, and I'll go in more detail with an example on each one. But real quick, successes, by far the highest percentage of stories that we get are in this successes category. Number 2 is coming attractions, and then challenges, and what we call an other category. So yeah, as I mentioned, successes is by far the most common that we get, and it's pretty self-explanatory. The story involves anytime you're involved in a successful project or event as a Vista, write about it. As I've mentioned before, it's your time to brag about the accomplishments that you have participated in. So an example is Alliance of Arizona nonprofit Vista member Colleen Wallace's grant writing talents for the food bank netted the organization over $1.4 million in grant funding this year. The funding supports many of the food bank operations, including the rural branches of the food bank, summer meals program, and the emergency food assistance program. The TFAP is the food bank's largest program, distributing meals to over 60 locations and providing individuals in a food crisis with 2 to 3 days worth of nutritious food. So again, this is a great time for you guys to brag about the different projects. Like for instance, this one, the $1.4 million that the grant helped raise, and again for the mission of helping people in food crisis. So again, these are the majority of the stories that we get are successes. But we do have two other categories. So the next one is coming attractions. Coming attractions is just where you would write about any interesting upcoming events or new projects or new partnerships that you or your organization are working on for the future. So an example of this is the Nike N7 Sports Summit takes place in Beaverton, Oregon, April 18th to the 20th. The event brings together Native youth and Native youth serving organizations, including the Nike N7 Let's Move in Indian Country Vista members from Portland, Oregon, Temecula, California, and Santa Ana Pueblo, New Mexico. Vista member Lila Walsh will present on healthy traditional food and sustainable gardening at 2 sessions. So yeah, again, this category is your time to discuss any interesting events or partnerships that your program is working on for the future. So the last category is kind of the catch-all category. It's your time to discuss any obstacles that you have to overcome with your programming or within your community, as well as your time to discuss special meetings or events with high-profile people, as we'll see in this example. On June 6th, over 350 attendees participated in the 2013 Massachusetts Conference on Service and Volunteering in Marlborough, Massachusetts. CNCS CEO Wendy Spencer was the keynote speaker and also facilitated a roundtable discussion with national service projects and partner organizations. So again, this is the category where you'll talk about, any important meetings that you might have with mayors, or in this instance, the CEO of our agency, the Corporation for National Community Service. So these stories don't necessarily have, what we've talked about in the past, the numbers, the results, but it's more of just a FYI kind of thing, and also any obstacles that you might have to overcome in your community. So those are the 3 categories. I'm going to transition back to Mary, who will introduce the Vistas who will be going over their examples.
Yeah, thanks, James. I just want to touch on, going back to what James said, there's a real value in being able to concisely relate what our impact is. Y'all are doing great work around the country, and just being able to have a statement about that work and its impact has a really powerful effect. So now that we've looked at what impact stories are, we've learned how to write impact stories, and also we've discussed what James went through, some of the types of impact stories, and mainly we're talking about successes here. We are going to invite 2 current Vista members to join us online, and they are going to talk with us and describe, the process of translating the work that they're doing into an impact story. First, we have Scott from Campfire USA Balcones Council here in Austin, Texas. And then we have Anna Alcott, who serves with Northland Cares in Prescott, Arizona. And we've asked both Scott and Anna to share a few things with us. So what we've asked for them to tell us is, 1, to describe their work, what it is that they're doing, and what it is that they chose to write an impact story about. Two, we've asked them to speak about the process of translating their work into an impact story. How did they look across all the stuff that they're doing, all the great work that they're doing, identify one thing, and then actually turn it into an impact story that concisely tells their work and its results in 4 to 5 sentences. And then finally, we've asked them to share with us what it is that they've done with the impact story, how it is that they've shared it, who they've shared it with, or what they plan to do with it even after this webinar. So those are the 3 things that we've asked them to talk to us about, and we're really excited to have them here with us. And I think it's interesting, especially to hear the process of that transformation from looking at the work that you're doing into actually coming out with one of these fully formed impact stories. So with that said, Scott, the floor is yours.
All right, well, thank you, and welcome everyone. Thank you for listening today. My name is Scott. I'm with Campfire in Austin, and I guess I'll start by talking a little bit about Campfire. Campfire is a youth development organization working to strengthen families through outdoor, nature-based educational activities and different trips and such, and there's a lot of ways that we do that. We have after-school programming, and we have different clubs that we call traditional clubs. There's what's called Family Nature Club, which is families kind of going on hiking and backpacking trips and such, and there's other more focused clubs. And through all of this, they're kind of linked through this program called Absolutely Incredible Kids, which is part of our after-school curriculum, as well as part of the curriculum for our traditional clubs. And AIK is a program that we do year-round that has to do with raising awareness about water conservation. Water conservation is a major issue here in Texas because not a lot of people are aware, but Austin in particular in Central Texas is under stage 2 drought restrictions right now, meaning that for the past 10 years we've been having a shortage of rainfall, and our aquifers are currently depleting, which has pretty serious ecological consequences a little bit further down the road. So part of what Campfire does is promoting environmentalism through our programs and doing service projects related to water conservation. We've kind of adopted this issue as kind of our main focus for the next 5 years. So what AIK does is it has kids participate in service projects in school, and then formally we had an event called the Walk for Water that has now been kind of retooled and refocused and is now called the Walk for Nature that takes place in the fall. And the Walk for Nature is all about getting families and kids outdoors and out to this event to kind of celebrate the work that they're doing for the AIK program, as well as raising awareness about this issue for the public. And my job as community outreach is working as part of the communications team, quote unquote. So part of my role for that project is to engage community partners, cultivate new partnerships, working to compose our media and marketing strategy, as well as kind of sitting on the planning committee, working with the programming and such, as well as recruiting and managing volunteers. A large part of my job is contacting our community partners, finding out ways that we can cross-promote, the ways that we can help them and they can help us, whether that be having a booth at our event or we table at one of their events, and just finding ways that we can work together to kind of mutually help each other. Another part of that is reaching out to new partners through sponsorships, through soliciting in-kind donations. We were actually able to get $500 of merchandise donated from Cabela's outdoor sporting goods shop to our organization that we then used to buy a kayak that we raffled off. So that's part of my job as well. And so how do we then turn that into an impact story? First, I think it's really important to be concise. A large theme throughout this presentation has been brevity, and that's really important. Consider the questions and get down to the point. So who, where, what, how, and the results. In my story here, I've kind of outlined the different parts of that, and it sounds weird writing them in the third person, but it's really important to do that just because of the ways you're going to use them. You could use it for submitting a grant proposal. You could use it to put as part of a tweet. You could have a link to it on your website. There's a ton of different ways to do it. So you can see in mine, I've kind of highlighted a bit vaguely some of the results that I had or some of the participation that I had in this project. And what that allows you to do is it allows people to understand how you were involved, but also gives them an opportunity to ask you questions and then describe a bit more of your impact. And then we've been talking a lot about results. In our particular event, we were able to meet all our fundraising goals because the event the year before wasn't as much of a success as we would have liked. But this year we really put a lot of work into it, and we actually saw a 500% increase in our fundraising goals as opposed to the year before. And anytime you can have a statistic like that, it's really great to include that. I think people respond very well to numbers that then you can describe in a bit more detail. And your impact may not be as tangible as that all the time. Your impact may be, if you work with the elderly, maybe having spent time talking with someone in a senior care home, your impact may be helping a child understand like kind of a complex subject or like relating to them in a certain way. It's easy to consider your impact when you just really think about everything you did. And it may not be, as easy as writing a number down, but everything you're doing is impactful. So it's just important to consider the questions and then translate that into describing what it is exactly your job was. So then what do we do with our impact story? Who wants to hear it? Community partners are a big one. Your community partners are supporting your organization and allowing you and your organization to do the work that you do. So it's really important to kind of give them validation and let them know that their support is going to something that is worthwhile. Donors as well, kind of the same thing. They want to know that their investment in you is actually doing good work, and it certainly is. We're all here working very hard for our individual causes. Potential sponsors as well. When you're seeking partnerships and sponsors, having tangible results like these and stories like these that are like in a brief, concise nature are really good to have on hand. Just so if it's on your website, you can have a link to it. You say, hey, I'm with this organization. This is what we're doing, and they can read these and kind of have an idea of what it is that you're doing. And you can share it through social media. This has been a major theme as well. They're great for tweeting. You can tweet an individual sentence of it, and then that allows people, that starts a conversation, in your annual report as well. It's really good to include this kind of stuff. And then I guess additionally, just really consider how to describe your impact in the most full way possible while not trying to tell more than you need to. And my classes in college, I studied creative writing, and one of my teachers liked to use this metaphor where if you're selling a bicycle, you could write a long ad describing every part of the bicycle, and it would tell them everything they need to know. Or you could have a sign that says bike for sale, and it solves all the same or answers all the same questions that really long ad that no one really has time to read. So I guess that's really all I have for you. I'll turn it back over to Mary at this point, unless there's anything more you'd like me to add.
That's great. Thank you, Scott, for sharing with us about your work with Campfire and sharing your impact story as well. We will, after the session, we'll open it up for questions. So if folks have questions for Scott, we'll provide a time for that in the future. But for now, let's hear from Anna in Arizona.
Clinic in Prescott, Arizona. And so what we do is we provide medical care to people living with HIV/AIDS, but in addition to that, we also provide health education as well as prevention, testing, um, all that kind of stuff for people in the general community, and that's where I come in. So my role as a Vista health educator and outreach coordinator involves forming partnerships with local community organizations. So most recently, I've been working with the local health department and with the local reentry project. I also establish and maintain connections with at-risk communities in our area. We mainly serve Prescott's large recovery population. It's known as the recovery capital. But we also maintain a presence in homeless shelters and in the 3 local colleges.
Anna, this is Mary. Can you speak up just a little bit? Folks are saying that they're having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, sure thing. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Sorry, everybody. I also implement HIV education and testing programs. So what we do is go into recovery homes, sober living homes, homeless shelters, college dorms, etc., and give presentations on what HIV is, how it's transmitted, and what it means to be living with HIV today. And if permitted, we also offer rapid HIV testing opportunities. I also secure funding and ensure sustainability of outreach programs. So basically doing research to ensure that the projects that I help build will continue when I'm finished at my site. So here are just some images from some events. On the left is a poster for a testing event at a college locally, and on the right is a picture from a free HIV testing tent that we had at the Arizona Stand Down for Homeless Veterans. So here are some tips for writing an impact story. When I start writing an impact story, the very first thing I do is revisit my VAD. So this helps me to recollect my thoughts and reform my drive because I may not be thinking of every little thing on that list at the moment. And it's an excellent reminder of what I'm here to accomplish in Prescott. So the second thing I do is look back at my calendar because I forget half of the things that I've done every month. And I admit that my memory isn't top-notch. But looking back at my VAD and my calendar, that's how I kind of start the process. It helps me identify a specific project or event that I was particularly proud of and kind of just set the stage for just really getting in the mood to write the impact statement. And then assess your impact. So what is in the community because of your work that otherwise would not be available? This should be relatively simply to answer. So chances are that as a Vista, you are meeting an unmet need in your community. And so your entire position is working towards providing something to your community that wasn't there before. And I think it's really empowering to think of it in this light. So without you, so-and-so wouldn't have happened. And this will give you an ego boost as well as help you pinpoint exactly what it is that you are bringing to the table in your community. Finding numbers and capacity building work. My biggest struggle with writing impact stories is finding numbers in the work that I do personally. So a lot of what I've been doing is related to capacity building. So I've done things like create a curriculum, I've strengthened partnerships, I've standardized protocols, things that aren't very numerical by nature. So what I have to do when I write impact stories during months where I work on these documents is to project my hopes for what they will accomplish in the future. And so in the impact story that I shared, in the next slide, what I did is project numbers of the people I plan on reaching, as well as how many organizations I'm reaching out to. And even though these numbers are yet to be realized, they are still powerful. Be a braggart. So this is something that maybe doesn't come naturally to a lot of you, and it certainly doesn't come naturally to me. And my Vista supervisor is constantly reminding me to give myself credit. So basically it boils down to this. The impact story is about you, and no matter how important you think the people are that you work with, this is the time to brag about yourself. So you need to draw on some of that ego boost that you got when you were assessing your impact, and just gloat away. Create a buzzword lexicon. So as you all know, buzzwords are just powerful, action-packed words, and buzzwords are to impact stories what onomatopoeia is to a comic book, so they give it some oomph. So whenever I stumble across a word or phrase that makes me go, yeah, that was pretty good, I like to type it into a Word document that I keep just for that purpose. And so that way, when I'm stuck, I can go back to it and pull sentences out of those buzzwords. And lastly, take a breather. So this is one of the most important things to do while writing anything. You have to step away for a little while. And if you have the time to leave it for a day, that's excellent. If you're running short on time, it's still important to take even a little break, even just 10 minutes or so, to collect yourself and then be able to come back to it with fresh eyes. So this is an example of an impact story. I know it looks kind of like a block of writing there, but everything's in there. So I'm not going to read it off, but I would like to point to the last sentence there. It says, the curriculum will be utilized at approximately 15 organizations, including outreach presentations at recovery homes, sober living houses, and homeless shelters. Anna's goal is to reach 2,000 at-risk individuals by August 2014. So here I'm outlining why it's important, and I'm doing that projection that I spoke of earlier. So there are no real numbers yet, but I am specifying what I hope the numbers will be. So what to do with an impact story? We've talked a lot about social media. So there's a reason for that. So we live in a new age, and social media has an amazing capacity to spread information and to reach new audiences. So it's a great thing to take advantage of. But you shouldn't forget about classic media. So if you've been working on something of particular interest to your community, you should try your hand at distilling it or elaborating upon it to make it appropriate for the local paper, a talk radio show, or maybe even an advertisement for your agency. So chances are that a portion of your audience relies on classic news sources. So it's important to remember to utilize those as well. You could include it in your organization's annual giving letter. You could share it with your college or university's alumni association. This is a way of reaching out to future Vistas. And I think it's also important to share it with the people who helped you to get where you are today. So I personally like to share it with the people who wrote my recommendations. And it's a nice way of kind of keeping a monthly contact with them because they really do want to know what you're up to. And that's all I have for today. So thank you, Mary.
Thank you very much, Anna, for sharing with us about your great work and also your process to write an impact story. I know that there's lots of gems of wisdom there. So now we want to open it up for questions. Teresa, can we please open up the line for questions?
Yes, thank you. If you'd like to ask a question, please dial *1. Please be sure to record your name when prompted. I do need your name to introduce your question. Again, please dial *1 and record your name. One moment, please.
Thanks, Teresa. So as we're waiting for questions to line up on the phone, if you have questions, please use the Q&A box on the screen. And Tracy, do we have any questions online?
Yes, actually, Angela wants to know, could you use this type of statement as a flyer or just to leave with partners?
Yeah, I think that all of those are great. I think when we talk about flyers, though, we have to think about what the intention of the flyer is. If it's a flyer to tell people about the work that we're doing, or, you know, when we talked about the coming attractions type of impact statement, if we're talking about those kind of flyers, then that's good. If we're thinking more marketing, media, publicity, this may not be the best way to go about it because we are, like Anna mentioned, we're looking at big blocks of text. So if we're thinking in a marketing strategy, and I know that there's other trainings out there for that, this may not be the right venue for that because we are looking at text-heavy things and we're trying to get across a lot of information in a very short amount of text. Tracy, are there any other questions online?
Yes, there are a few people who have chimed in to say, What if someone wasn't available to listen to this discussion, or if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, or will they be able to get a recording of this? And so I just want to give everyone a heads up that yes, we will be putting this under the webinars on demand section of the campus, and you'll have all those resources, as well as an email following this webinar where you will get the PowerPoint and other resources that were shared during this discussion. So if you want to make sure that you can get extra review of the materials, don't worry, it will be there. Or if you want to share it with someone who was unable to attend, we will also have that available for you.
Thank you, Tracy. Teresa, do we have any questions on
There are
the
no questions.
line?
There are no questions on the phone line.
Okay.
All right, well, Mary, there is another question from Christina. What if numbers aren't readily available? For example, I got a small grant to have a violence prevention workshop at our all-women building and partnered with, oh, it seems like Robin answered that for her, so sorry about that.
Okay.
No, I mean, but other people probably have the same question. What if numbers aren't readily available for everyone?
Robin, did you answer that question already?
No, we were just letting them know that the presenter was answering it.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's what we let people do. So,
if there aren't numbers available readily, Anna mentioned this in her chat when she was talking about how she developed this curriculum, and it was great, but she couldn't speak to what was going to happen with it. But it's still really a great success to develop the curriculum. So what she did, which I thought was great, was she said, she plans to implement this curriculum with something like 2,000 people by October of 2014. So I think that is a really great way of getting around this, because a lot of times with capacity building work, we're setting the stage for those impacts. But when we think about things like writing grants, generally when we're writing the grant, we like to talk about what we're going to do if we get the grants. So in that case, I would make sure to qualify it, of course, with saying, with this grant, we plan to serve, 500 children at this elementary school and, through a tutoring program that involves 50 volunteers. But just be careful to qualify it with the plans too, so that there isn't a lot of confusion about whether or not these children have been served or these volunteers are actually working on there. But I think that especially when we're talking about capacity building work, a lot of times we're talking about our anticipated, and in that case, just a qualifying word like plans to or expects to or hopes to is the way to show that. So Tracy, any other questions?
Yes, Chevette has a great question. So we know what impact statements are and the different components to them, but when should a Vista use them? When should they be thinking about using these?
Well, here with the corporation, we submit, like James said, we submit monthly reports. So a really easy way to use these right off the bat is to send them on to your state office. We use them internally in a dozen different ways. It's a great way to show the work that y'all are doing around the country, and it helps us to concisely show the impact of Vista on a national level for, as James was saying, policymakers in Washington. So that's kind of an easy way to use them, is to send them into your state office. Other ways that we were talking about, use them in local newspapers. If you have a newsletter, if your organization does, this is a really nice way to say, what are the Vistas working on now? And you could have a little half-page thing, and you could, each Vista could write an impact story about what the great work is that they're doing there. So those are kind of some ideas, and I know that James also went over some other things. You can post it on Facebook. Anna was talking about, sending impact stories to the folks that have, helped you along the way to help them get a picture of what you're doing as a Vista. So those are some of the ways in which you can use impact stories just right out of the box.
Yeah, and I just wanted to chime in with use them in a timely basis. We love hearing them, when they're 6 months old, but we're probably not going to pass that up to headquarters just because it is, 6 to 8 months old. So, when you do write them, pass them on right away to your state office, as well as posting it on Facebook and whatnot. So use them in a timely manner after the project is completed or the event happens.
Yeah, that's a great point. An impact story that says there was a great event that happened in 2001 doesn't have the same impact as a great event happened in, December 4th of 2013. Tracy, any other questions?
Yes, James wants to know, why do we often get requests to convert volunteer activities to monetary figures by avoiding some non-measurable types of projects which do lots of good otherwise?
I think that's a really good question, and it brings into, a lot of other questions when we think about, the numbers to the impact and all of that kind of thing. Whether we like it or not, a lot of times folks, when they see numbers, they see something else, whereas when they see, descriptions of impacts, it doesn't necessarily carry the same weight. But I think that if we are talking about, a project that has volunteers that are working on really great things and they're doing really great things, and maybe it doesn't have to do with a grant or anything like that, that is still a really great impact. And I think that, just because we're saying we have an emphasis on fundraising in this presentation, if you have a project, for example, Anna's story about creating a new curriculum that is not fundraising related, and I think that is a really powerful impact. So feel free to disassociate the two, and if you have volunteers that are doing great work that you are helping to mobilize and train, that is a great impact story.
As another question from Tara, she's going to be presenting soon in Kansas City and asks, would it be a good use of my impact story or statement during that presentation?
Without knowing the details of the presentation, I'm not sure that I can really fully answer that, but sure, why not? I think it's never a bad time to tell people about the impacts that we're making in our communities. Teresa, do we have any questions on the phone?
There are no questions at this time.
Okay. Tracy, any other questions online?
Nope, none that haven't been answered already. So if anyone else has a question that they would like to submit through the Q&A feature, please do so. Steve wants us to know that he has a question coming, so we are waiting for your question, Steve.
Excellent. I'm very excited.
In the meantime, there have been several questions about where on the Vista campus you can access the webinars on demand. If you look in the chat, Robin has pasted this URL several times for you all, and also in the Q&A that everyone can see, she's answered that question too. So thank you for bringing that up several times, and we're glad to know that you are actively seeking this information out.
Yeah.
Okay, Sydney wants to know, how often do you write impact statements?
I would generally say once a month. James, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I say as much as possible. Definitely, definitely after any kind of big event, noteworthy event or project that you participated in. But yeah, as much as possible, definitely, and pass them on immediately to the state office, and post them as we've mentioned in a timely manner.
Yeah, it might be a good idea to set a calendar reminder and say, hey, I'm going to spend an hour today, every month to think about an impact story, because a lot of times life passes us by and we get really busy and caught up in other things. So I can understand the question about scheduling them.
Lillette wants to know, I'm doing a community cleanup with a few other Vistas. Should I use that as an opportunity to write an impact story?
Sounds like a great impact story. Yeah, I think that community cleanups are definitely impactful and have great results for our communities. So, in my opinion, no impact story is too small. We impact people on an individual basis, and that is just as important, and we want to hear about that as well.
Christopher asks, would it be appropriate to include the impact statement or story when writing a grant?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, yeah, as I mentioned, yeah, I mean, it could definitely lead to future funding for your organization. So, you know, you might have to modify it for each different kind of grant, but yeah, definitely use it.
Yeah, I echo James. I'm definitely in favor. I would make sure to read the grant instructions to make sure that you're answering all the questions. But I think that being able to concretely and concisely write your results or your impacts is a great thing, and it can be used in a myriad of different ways. And I think definitely in grant applications it has a place. Any other questions online, Tracy?
Yes, so we just got Steve's question in.
Okay.
So Steve says he's mining. It's hard to identify impacts. Also, just reviewing online research for grant writing team of an Excel spreadsheet of companies in Kansas that perform matching gifts. My sense is that Kansas big brother and big sister is uncertain how best to use Vista. I have suggested writing a weekly blog, but receiving weak response so far, even with several prototype columns.
I am not sure that I understand the question. I think when we talk about how best to use Vista, I think a good place to start is what Anna was talking about with her VAD, is to looking at the activities on your VAD and, you know, of course, checking in with your projects to make sure that those activities are what you're working on. And then that's a great place to draw inspiration from for your successes, is to look at your VAD.
And I'm seeing, I think it's, you know, maybe it's a two-part question here. The second half is saying that he has suggested writing a weekly blog. He hasn't gotten a good response yet, but would something like a weekly blog be a suitable place for doing ongoing impact stories?
Definitely. I think that would be a great place for ongoing impact stories. And if we talk about writing them monthly, we could have a, you know, monthly column on what are the Vistas doing now and what's the great work that y'all are doing.
Great. Now, Rashonda is looking ahead and saying, how can you use your impact stories after your Vista story, after your Vista service?
Yeah, well, I mean, from a personal experience, I think just, you know, using it, you know, in job applications even, you know, when you're trying to get a new job after your Vista term, you know, use those either verbally, you know, in interview processes or, you know, if they ask for writing samples or whatnot. And then also, as Anna said, you know, keep your network connected with what you're going during your term, but also after. You know, people that have helped you get to where you are right now, keep them informed on what you did throughout your year. So use it that way as well.
That's a great point, James. Like we were saying, it's kind of the, you know, the elevator speech of your Vista service and writing, but it can also be the elevator speech, you know, when you talk about it as well, and especially, you know, when folks ask you questions in interviews about your results. These are great things that you can quickly come back to.
Jasmine has a question that sort of goes with what you were talking about, activities outside of a Vista's VAD. She's saying, like, all Vistas do sometimes have those one-off activities, and they are a great experience for the Vista and the organization. But is that something that she should consider doing an impact statement about?
Yeah, of course. I mean, all Vista work hopefully produces great results. So I think that that's definitely something that you should look to do an impact story. As a side note, if your activities are very much outside of your VAD, you may want to revisit the VAD as well. But as far as impact statements go, please look to the totality of the work that you're doing, because I'm sure that there are many things that you can write about.
It seems Sabrina is letting us know that she has a question that's waiting for us on the phone.
Great. Teresa, you want to queue her up?
Yes, at this time, if you'd like to ask that question on the audio side, please press star 1.
Do we have any calls, Teresa? Do we have any questions on the phone?
At this time, there are no questions on the phone.
Okay.
I'm sorry, one question did just pop in the queue. One moment. Sabrina, your line is open.
Thank you. So my question was specifically, I had the question about the VAD, and I've been following my VAD, but there's also, because my organization is so large, and I've had so many different impacts. Like we just got an externship program started here that I was able to set up with one of the colleges here in Tucson, which I know is like a great impact as far as capacity building, because it's something that long after I'm gone, they'll have like this influx of volunteers coming in to assist them. But I know when it's come time at the beginning of every month for me to write my statements, since it is kind of off of what my VAT is, it's hard to, I guess, distinguish how to put that in there appropriately, I guess, or to show that I'm making an impact just in different ways, every month.
I think that sounds like a great impact story, and I think I would definitely look to, starting up that new program is a wonderful thing to write an impact story about. So I would keep going with that.
Okay.
Does that answer
All right.
the question?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that was the other thing. It's like how do you put it in there? It's just, is that something that you just kind of write separately? That's not really a part of the VAT. Is that how it works?
Well, impact stories are different from your VAT. I mean, they're independent stories. So you could write one on a Word document, and it would still be your impact story.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm showing no other questions at this time.
Okay, great. As a follow-up to Steve's question about the blog, I think he's wondering how would he write that first blog post? Given the fact that a blog, is typically longer than how long you're saying the impact statement is. So is it he's combining that statement into the blog post, or, how would you go about doing that?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you want to stick to the impact story format, you could put a couple of them in there and just say, here were our impacts from the last month. But I think if you are interested in doing a larger description of an event or a successful project, then maybe this is not the right format, because it is 4 to 5 sentences. If you do have the time and the space to write a one-page blog post, and that's what the audience is looking for, then you may want to consider that. But what we're looking for in impact stories are really concise pictures, snapshots of the good work that folks are doing.
Yeah, but I mean, with that said, yeah, I mean, you could definitely use it or you could use your impact story as kind of a basis and then kind of expand from there. If for instance your blog is more a longer story, you can definitely use your impact story and then expand it, and then going backwards, you can cut it down as well. Going back to I think one of the earlier questions, using the flyer as a way with the impact story, you can take it out and so it doesn't read necessarily as a story, but use bullet points or something and pull like the numbers or pull like the impact from that for the flyer purposes. So yeah, it can work both ways. But yeah, our stories, as we've mentioned, are 4 to 5 sentences, and then you can make them shorter for flyers or make them longer for blogs, definitely.
Christopher has a question that's sort of a follow-up to that. What methods of communication do you all think are the most effective when it comes to delivering an impact statement? Would it be something written or in an email, or is face-to-face just as effective?
When we are here in our presentation, we're specifically talking about written impact stories. And those can take the form of emails to folks. Face-to-face, I guess we would more be talking about conversations, and that's when we talk about true elevator speeches, which would be good to draw from your impact stories. James, do you have anything else to add?
No, yeah, I think, yeah, it's usually through email and written. That's what we're discussing right now. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Sheena wants to know if the impact overall is coming from the organization and help from the steps that you are taking as a Vista. Is it okay to highlight the actual organization as a whole instead of singling yourself out for the work that you're doing?
I think
Yeah,
that
definitely talk about your organization, as we've said in several examples of, Vista at Joe Smith at such and such organization serving in, whatever city, Texas. But yeah, you definitely want to point out what agency or what organization you as a Vista is serving at, definitely.
Yeah, and what we're really interested in is what you as a Vista did at that organization that you're serving at. So, well, a lot of times we work in partnerships with other organizations or other staff people. We're really interested in what you did as a Vista. What is your work? Tracy, any other questions?
That is all that I see at the moment.
I have no other questions over the phone line.
Okay. Well, thank you all for your really thoughtful questions. We're looking forward to seeing lots of great impact stories. Before we sign off, we want to close with offering up some concrete next steps to guide you in writing your own impact stories. So first, think about your work, your successes, your challenges, your coming attractions. Second, identify the questions. Where does the story take place? What is the issue area? Who is involved? How are you addressing the problem? And what are your results? And third, sit down and write an impact story. And then finally, once you've written your story, be sure to share your impact. So thank you all for being with us this afternoon. We look forward to reading your impact stories and to learning more about the work that you do and its impact.